All right, so as Scott mentioned, today we're going to be talking a little bit about BIM List, specifically how its content management can help your teams in their workflows. Now, we're actually right in the middle of a series right now talking about how to clean up your projects. In fact, coming up on Thursday of this week, we're going to be doing part 2 of that particular series. And within that series, eventually we'll be talking a little bit more about BIM List. But for today, I wanted to go through and give you kind of a massive overview of how this tool works and let you really kind of see some of the inner workings. So why did we come up with this tool in the first place? Well, we've had a lot of users contact us and BIM managers give us a call and talk about some of the issues they're having with other content management solutions that they've worked with just in general trying to find content that they can work with and use inside the Revit models. And generally we see these recurring problems. Users are having a difficult time understanding what content they're supposed to be using. And actually, administrators of Revit are having a difficult time getting users to understand where that content is and where they can find the latest version of something, especially when there's multiple iterations that exist across the network. That can be a big problem. And that just sometimes is a reality. Sometimes it happens. People will save a version of a family into an old project folder, and they'll either keep going back to that because they know it and they trust it, they know it's good, it has the latest version, or it's predictable in how it functions or whatever. And it's difficult to overcome that when users can't trust the primary folder on the network. So also, users have a difficult time just in general when they're looking for a piece of content, finding something that they're looking for, finding a family based on properties that exist inside the family. I want a door that has a certain manufacturer. It's a Stanley door, it's a Besom door, it's whatever. I'm trying to find a door that matches what I need based on its parameter, not just by family name, but by types inside of it and values of those of parameters within those types. Sometimes that's tricky to do. Also, when you're dealing with things like system families, wall types, roof types, railing types, conduit systems, things like that, it's really difficult to go through and locate the proper system, the proper system family type from other projects. When you do that, if you're pretty savvy in Revit, you probably know how to go in there and use the transfer project standards technique, where you can transfer all of the wall types into your project. Well, I don't usually want all my wall types. Usually what I want is a wall type, one wall type that I want to bring in. I don't want all 45 of a certain type of wall. So it might be nice if I could actually more easily go through and find system families that I want to work with and bring them in from other projects instead of having to transfer all of them in. And users want to have easy access to content that they commonly use. Yeah, it might be organized in all different places on the network in different folders, but if they use it on a regular basis in pretty much every project they work in, they may want an ability for themselves to be able to go through and mark something as a favorite and continually use it over and over and over again and have quick and easy access to it. So that's all the issues that we see, not all of them. That's just a lot of the issues, kind of the overarching, broad sweeping issues that a lot of users have explained to us. So we worked with a lot of our large clients, medium clients, even the small clients, and went in and just kind of said, what can we do to help fix this problem? And the solution we came up with, our development team sat down and put together the BIM List environment, specifically the BIM List browser for users. And this is nice because it allows users to see whatever the administration team has actually deemed as ready for use in projects, content that has been released. It provides a powerful search engine for them so that they can search their corporate family library using either a simple search on individual tabs that have been organized per the administrators. They can search inside of families even there. And they can even go more advanced than that and search across the entire library of content that exists inside of BIM List to find individual pieces of content that match certain criteria. And they have the ability to favorite any of the content that they found so they can use it again rapidly in the future if they find that it's meaningful for them to continue using over and over and over in additional projects. So what I want to do is kind of jump into Revit real quick, and I want to show you how the BIM List browser portion can work. I'm not going to drag any content into my project today. We're just going to talk about finding content, and I'll talk a little bit about how I can bring it in. Maybe I'll bring 1 or 2 pieces in, but the goal here is to kind of show how the browser itself functions. So I'm using the BIM Project Suite at this point. There's a free tool here called BIM List Browser. There's also a free tool called BIM List Admin, which I'll talk about in a little while here. But I'm going to start with the BIM List Browser as the first portion. The browser is this tool right here. This particular tool allows me to sort of organize my or look at my organized content based on the groups that have been set up for me by the administrators. And again, we'll talk about how to set up those tools in just a moment here. In this case, I've got just some general stuff, components that everybody in my company uses, basic annotations, maybe some profiles, maybe some title blocks that I want all disciplines in the firm to be using. And so that's my general organization. This is just how I've set it up. Obviously, there's other ways of setting this up, and we'll talk about that in a moment here. I've also got my architectural group here where I've got different portions of disciplines based on Revit category in this case. And if you look down here, there's actually a component here, the closet, shelf, and pole, that has been used in my project right now. I can tell it's been used because it's highlighted sort of in this cyan color. So if I was looking for another closet, shelf, and pole for whatever reason, my eyes would be drawn to this, and I'd be very likely to use this component again and open it up and take a look at its type data inside of it and go, oh yeah, there's a 15-inch and 18-inch version inside of there. And I can even expand those out and see what some of their properties are, and then eventually bring in whichever type or start to insert whatever type it is that I need to work with in my project environment. So, I mean, it makes it real easy to find content that's already loaded, so I'm not loading in some other variation and going out to the internet trying to find something that, you know, that's a closet, shelf, and pole when I've already got one in my library, for one, and number two, I've already got that component actually already in my project. But yeah, I can go through and find things like doors, right? And I can do it for any discipline. I've got structural libraries and mechanical, plumbing, electrical, different kind of groups inside of here. And even when it comes right on down to detailing, I hear a lot of my clients, especially when they're new in Revit, have a really difficult time struggling through leveraging Revit detailing because the library just isn't there for them. They don't feel like they can navigate it properly. Well, there is a full detail library of 2D detail components that are available. Basically, they're like smart AutoCAD blocks. And I can go into that library and I can search for components that I need. So if I'm looking for something that's concrete, since I'm in the concrete folder here, maybe I just type in concrete. And as I'm typing, what it'll do is start filtering down my library here and find all the components that are concrete. And from there, I can expand that out and start finding what types exist inside of this, you know, 2D detailed concrete footing rectangular section graphic, and start bringing one of these sizes into my project and actually drop in this block, so to speak, this family, and leverage this in my project environment as a 2D component. I can do the exact same thing with masonry here. If I'm looking for something in masonry that is a certain thing, I'm looking for brick or something, I can just start typing in brick. And as I type that in, I start seeing all of the components in my library that match the name of brick, and from there I can very easily start to drag and drop individual sizes and components in for 2D detailing. So it makes that process of finding content with this simple search very quick and very easy once I get to the tab that I want. Now, in addition to that, if I'm trying to find across my entire library anything that happens to match the category of doors, maybe I don't know where it's organized. Maybe it's I've got a couple of different disciplines that I've put in here, a couple of different practice groups like healthcare and residential, you know, multifamily residential. Maybe I've got you know, commercial and detention centers, and I've got doors that are kind of scattered about those different libraries on doors tabs. Well, if that's the case, that's fine. What I can do is I can actually expand out my search area up here and start searching by some other method. Like I can say, what is the category name? Maybe I want to make sure the category name equals something like doors. This will then go through my library once I tell it to search, and it'll find every single door in my library, and it'll tell me where in my library it happens to exist. Now, in this particular library, I don't have doors all over the place. I only have it in one spot. It's in my architecture group. It's on the doors tab. And inside the doors tab, I can find all of my doors there. But I can go beyond this and search this down as well. I can go in there and search something about the family name and find out something about it that that is called double. So I can say, oh yeah, the operator, you know, contains the value of double or something. So I can just type out double here. So anything that includes the word double, go ahead and search for that. And it'll, again, filter out any of my categories that are doors. It'll go find any of those doors that happen to be double doors in this case. And so I can go through and then find the double doors specifically and you know, insert one of those into my project and leverage them in some form. But this will search across my entire library and find the content that I'm looking for. Also, as I'm working inside of here, what I can do if I find a piece of content that I like to use on a regular basis, maybe in my workflows, I am almost always using the single flush door and the double flush door. What I can do is select one of those doors and I can add it to my favorites list. I can also scroll down here, maybe I'll find the single flush door, maybe this one also gets added to my favorites list. And maybe I'm always using a particular door tag that I like to work with. So over here on my annotations tab, Maybe I look for anything that includes the word tag or door here. So there's my door tag, which happens to already be loaded in my project, but I want to make sure that I add this to my favorites also. So by me doing that, what I can actually do is leverage that favorites tab and just have those specific pieces of content available to me on a regular basis here. So I'm going to go ahead and tell it to display my favorites tab. And then the nice thing here is that regardless of which group I happen to be in, my favorites tab is always there. So it doesn't matter if I'm in a project environment, in one of my project groups, or if I'm in one of my discipline-specific groups. As an end user, my favorites tab is always here at the top, and I can always go find that content and take any of these components and drag and drop it into my project at will. And it's really easy to find instead of having to go back to a previous group at the top here, find a particular tab, search for the door again, find my double flush door. No, it's real easy. It's on my favorites tab. As long as I keep this list nice and concise, it makes it really easy for me to find what I'm looking for. And this is, again, where users, once they find a family that they like, they'll oftentimes save it in their own personal library because they don't want to have to keep going out to some random spot in the network and remembering where that is. This way, they don't have to do that. They can leave it be the main family in the main library and just mark it as a favorite. And then they can just continue to leverage this component over and over and over again. So that can be a huge time saver for users and projects. It helps them go find the content they need. They're not going out to places like Revit City when you've already got content on your network that matches what it is they want. It allows them to really be able to tune their searches for what it is they're looking for and bring in exactly what they want. And one more thing, as I mentioned earlier, when dealing with information like system families, down here I've got a couple of my company standard templates, for example, or possibly even previous projects or container files that I've configured. And I can go to something like my architectural container file right here. And inside of here, maybe I've got some typical architectural details. Well, in this case, I don't have any details in there yet. But if I go to something like my ceilings, I can grab a ceiling type that I want to work with. So my primary template can be incredibly bare. And I can take one of these ceilings and bring them into my project and leverage that right away, instead of having to go, okay, what file was that? All right, I have to open up that particular project file in the background, so I got to do open detached, and then I have to go over here to the manage tab and run my transfer project standards and remember to uncheck everything and check my, no, I can go directly to BIM List browser and simply grab a ceiling and drag and drop it in, and it's available for me to use. Actually, I'm not sure if I have any of those ceilings in my project right now. Let's go find out, and we'll see if we can bring one of those across. Actually, oddly enough, this is this project file that's actually being used. This is my container file. So this would be a bad example because all these ceilings are going to be in here already, right? If I expand this out, I've got a number of compound ceilings that exist. Those are already all in that list over there. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to start a brand new file here. I'm going to shut this particular project down. I'll close it out. I'm going to do a brand new file. Actually, I'll do I'll open up a project template that I like to use personally for my new projects here. I've got a sample little project here, right here, that's basically an empty project. It has almost nothing in it. And I'll open this up detached. That's a pretty typical process here when I'm opening up from a starter project file. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. And I'm going to go ahead and save this someplace. And for today's purposes, I'll just put it on my desktop once this is done opening. And by the way, I used a term a moment ago called container file, and I think I saw a question pop up that was asking, what is a container file? I use the term container file, and actually there's a couple of other companies out there who have begun using that as well. What that means is it's just a project, a Revit project file that's been saved that has a bunch of family content in it, system family content. It's got wall types. It's got a bunch of railing types. Maybe it's got some conduit type definitions in there. Maybe it's got a bunch of details inside of it. And it's just kind of a bucket you can dump a bunch of your standards into, and it's a one source or one-stop shop for users to go find content. Maybe to keep things nice, neat, and clean, you put them as multiple discipline container files. But ultimately, you're just using it to hold standard information that doesn't have a spot out on your network someplace. Normally, if it's a component family, like an RFA that I can save out, I'll put that out on my network. I'll save that as a family in my library. That's an external family or a loadable family. But there's a lot of components that only exist within the boundary of a project, like walls, like railings, like stairs. And those are things that I use from multiple different projects, and trying to keep them up to date can be kind of tricky. So what we use is a container file, one file that holds them all, and then I can leverage that container file over here in BIM List so that I can actually go look at that file, that container file, that file that holds a bunch of wall types that I want to work with, or ceiling types or whatever, and then I can bring those across into my project one by one. Now, let me get my file saved here. I haven't saved it yet, so I'm going to go ahead and save this file out here on my desktop. Desktop's usually a really poor place to save it, but for today's purposes, that's where I'm going to put it right now. So A15-office something, I don't know, doesn't really matter, dash a project number. We'll put today's date on it for this. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure I've got the proper number of backups, and I've got whatever options here I want to be using. So specify my work sets, just basic file saving, good best practices, whatever it is you need to have set up as your settings. So once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and create for myself a quick floor plan since I don't have any floor plans here. Again, this container or this template project that I work with is pretty bare, and that's the intent of it. So we're going to take a quick peek here at View Creator, which is another one of our tools. Just going to make a couple of quick floor plans here for my project, just some general floor plans for the new construction. So I'll add those and create those views real quick. Got 4 floor plan views here underneath my general view. I'm going to go to the first level floor plan, and my desire here now is to start drawing up some walls. Well, if I go into my families list right now as an end user, and I go to walls, I've got some generic walls here. They're pretty generic, right? There's nothing really special about them. I have one curtain wall, just a basic default curtain wall, and I have one default stacked wall, which probably just uses one of these generic walls as its graphic. Well, that's all well and good, but what I really want to draw with is something that's maybe a 14-inch concrete wall for whatever reason. I want to draw with that particular wall type. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this 14-inch concrete wall here. I'm going to drag and drop this into my project. And what Revit's going to do right now is it's going to load it in and let me begin using this basic wall in my project environment. So over here in the families list, once it's done loading, it's going to, in the background, what it's going to do is open up that project, and it's going to bring across just the one wall type. Normally, transfer project standards would bring across all of the basic walls. That's not what I want. I just want the one. And yeah, it might take it a second to go ahead and do that, but as an end user, I didn't just spend 10 minutes going to look for the right project file to open it up, detached, making sure I don't mess it up, and then doing transfer project standards and waiting another 5 minutes. It took it 20 seconds, and it brings in my wall type. So it's still pretty quick because it does have to access that external file, but it brings it across very quickly. And now I've got it right here, and I can begin drawing that wall type directly in my project. So I can draw a little building out here, nothing super spectacular. But this is, if I click over to the actual properties window here, let's call it properties. Properties, there we go. So here in my properties window, this is my basic wall concrete 14-inch that came from my container wall file. So nice and easy, nice and quick, right? It's right there. And if I was to go back to that architectural model here and take a look at my walls, I can now see that that particular concrete 14-inch wall was loaded in once, right? If I want to load it in, I can load it in again. If I want to redefine it, I can reload this into my Revit project file and redefine the wall type if it gets screwed up for some reason. Makes it really easy for me to go through and bring across these wall types very easily. So that's system families being brought in. And again, you can also do details. I don't have any details in that particular container file, but if I was to go to one of my other container files, let's see if I have any details inside of there. Yeah, I've got a couple of details here from my mechanical file. They're just two-dimensional drafting views is what they are. But I can take these two-dimensional drafting views, and based on the name, I could drag and drop this across from this other project into my active project, and have a drafting view that actually gets defined. So I can start bringing into my file from this other detail outside library content that I need as an end user. Easy to find. Again, I can search at the top up here for something specific. If I want to look for something that was like a heat recovery unit, I can just start typing that in, and it's going to go ahead and bring that across. Oh, by the way, that particular model that I'm using here apparently was saved last in 2014, so it's actually going to run through an upgrade process here as it brings that opens up that project file. So we'll do an upgrade. I do recommend, by the way, normally having your project models, especially those container files, in whatever version your BIM List database is. So this is 2015. It should have probably been upgraded at some point. I failed to do that before I added it to my library here, but so it's going to take it a second to actually upgrade that as it brings my detail across. But still, that was quick, right? It brings it in. It gives me whatever that typical detail happens to be. It puts it over here in my project browser, groups it wherever it was supposed to be. In this case, it has no subgroupings on it, but it brings it across and names it the same name. So now I have this drafting view that's available to me. My users can start referencing this and putting them on sheets, and it's based on my typical detail library. And the user didn't have to go and transfer 2D views from their project. They can just drag and drop out of BIM List. So it's a one-stop shop for component families, annotation families, detail views, drafting views, and system families. All of it can come from one source. They can search the entire library for something, find what they're looking for, and drag and drop it in. Nice and easy, really simple. All right. So let me move on now to the other portion here. I want to talk about the administration side of this. Now that users have had the ability to actually drop content, and let's see how the administrator organized that in the first place. So jump back over here to the PowerPoint. And let's progress forward one slide here. So as I mentioned earlier, BIM managers have had a difficult time letting users know what the latest content happens to be. What is the latest content? Where are they supposed to go find it? Well, again, if it's been loaded into BIM List, users have that one-stop shop of where they're supposed to go and find that particular content. Unfortunately, users don't often reload updates into their projects. But if you can train users and get them to consistently use BIM List as their source for dragging and dropping content in, as they drag and drop that in, they can always have the latest version. So then if there's been an update, it just reloads that update into their project. Of course, if it causes any problems for whatever reason, you certainly can go through and work with them to figure out what issues might exist and whatnot and resolve those. But they would have those issues anyway if they were loading new content in. This way, it's just you're finding it earlier in the process instead of later when it's much more detrimental. As a manager, when I worked in a lot of my client firms before BIM List was out there, I used to help them by maintaining multiple folders. There was a released folder, so users would see that as the primary library, and then there was a whole second folder of sandbox content. And again, this caused a little bit of confusion on the administration side because then they're like, okay, well, which folder do I create this in? When do I move it across? When is it right to, put this in the main folder? When do I trust it enough? Things like that. Well, you don't have to do this anymore. You can actually maintain a single folder in the BIM List. So we'll talk about that in a moment here. You can have all your content in one massive set of folders, not have to do any kind of sandboxing, and when you're ready for users to gain access to it, you release it to the BIM List. And ultimately, again, there's that difficult time distributing project standards, things like wall types, things like drafting views that users need to be using. So, we're gonna find out in a moment here how it's pretty easy to distribute that just by using, again, BIM List as the source for that content. So again, in the BIM List browser, in the BIM List admin tool, actually, what it allows for is a single corporate library. The managers can release content whenever you're ready. You add it to the BIM List, and if for some reason content has a major problem and you need to pull it back out, you can remove it from BIM List and add it back in later when it's ready to be re-released. It's very easy to drop in individual bits of content. You can grab individual files. You can grab entire folders. There's subfolders that you can have automatically organized into tabs. And again, you can use project models for system content, system family content. So it makes that process pretty easy. Now, there's a question that popped up while I was talking about this content. There's a new feature in MEP that allows for fabrication items. And Autodesk actually has their own sort of fabrication library tool there. So does BIM List manage the fabrication items? I haven't actually done a lot of testing on that, but I believe the fabrication items themselves are individual families, though there's actually a larger database in the back end that you can pull from that helps to kind of spec some of that stuff. So will it work with the content? Yeah. Is it the ideal environment to leverage it? At this point, probably not, since Autodesk has actually given us a really decent fabrication tool inside of Revit MEP specifically, or Revit, the one installation of Revit that also includes MEP. You probably would want to use that tool instead. So there was also another question that was asking about schedules. Are schedules supported? The answer is absolutely, schedules are supported. In fact, I'm going to show you an example of that here in a moment as I'm working with the BIM List browser here. I'm going to add some schedules to the list from the administration environment, and you'll actually see how schedules can actually be used in this environment. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the demonstration again, and we're going to jump directly back into Revit. And instead of using the BIM List browser now, what I'm going to do is focus more on the admin tool. And we're going to actually make some changes to this library here. I'm going to add another folder here to my detailing directory. Actually, a lot of these have been pulled. I just have a small sampling of my detailing library right now. What I'm going to do is actually add a couple more families from, say, the 05 set. I believe that's woods and plastics. So we're going to add 05 into this list here as a subfolder. And also, I'm going to go into adding a new project file in here. or maybe I'll update one of these ones that already exists and add some schedules from that project. Since my architecture here, did I have schedules? It did have schedules, okay. Maybe I'll remove some of the schedules from here that I don't want users gaining access to for whatever reason. So I'll kind of administer this and strip out some of these schedules and just leave in the door frame schedule and the room schedule. And that'll be it for the example for today. So I'm going to go over here to the BIM List admin environment again. And in this environment here, you can see here's my database already configured. Now, if you want to configure a database completely from scratch, it's actually very easy. You can go here to Databases, make a brand new database. In this case, it's either a local or remote database. Depends if you have the tool called BIM List Server installed. BIM List Server is a third component to this little tool set here. And what it lets you do is have your database centralized on a central server and more easily distributed to all of the users that want to connect to it. So if you're interested in that particular tool, definitely get a hold of our sales team. They'd be glad to talk with you about that. That tool does have a little bit of a cost to it. It's relatively small though, so we want to make it sure that so that it wasn't encumbering for you to gain access to that particular tool. But I'm going to go ahead and do a new local database here. And if I made one for today's webinar, so I'm going to call this webinar 2015-0505. I'm just going to make this a local database, so it's not going up to my server for right now. This is just going to be my local computer. And if I want to later on after I build a local database, I can always convert a database to a remote database, so I can actually get it copied up to my server so that it becomes available to all users. So right now when you're first taking a look at BIM List, make yourself some local databases, no big deal. And later on you can always convert them to be a remote database. One question that also popped up when talking about servers is, can there be a cloud server? And basically, if your users can access it via like Windows Explorer, right? If I can go into Windows over here and I can map a network drive to it consistently for users and they can ping it directly, then yeah, you can definitely use a cloud server. Shouldn't be a problem. You can host your content on there if you want to. You could probably even host up there your BIM List database on the BIM List server, provided it's a Windows environment, and so they could definitely source their content from that location. So yeah, a cloud server could be used in leveraging BIM List. Of course, your performance is going to somewhat depend on what your connection speed is to that. So if you were in, say, a Wi-Fi environment with a really poor connection in a coffee shop, you might not get the best performance at first, at least if the content happens to be up there. But the database side would be pretty quick still. The database is actually relatively light, and whenever I'm working with one of these BIM List databases, even if it is a remote server that's hosting it, it gives me a local copy of it. In fact, this database right here, this Revit 2015, is a database that comes off of one of my servers in Minneapolis. And it's pretty easy for me to get access to that. You know, if I click over to Revit 15, it's going to check that database for any updates and give me the latest version. And then I can start manipulating that Revit 2015 database right here from Arizona. So no big deal there. Again, it's going to take it a second because it has to get the latest updates from that. And there probably have been a few updates since I last got this. And I am on actually a Wi-Fi connection right now, so it might take it a second there. But ultimately, you can create a database from the database dropdown. Again, there's a lot of administration you can do right there. So in this case, there's my Revit 2015 database. It's got the latest version on my computer, and now it's a local database, so now I can browse it very easily and start administering it pretty quickly. Now I'm going to switch back to today's little webinar database quickly here and show you how you can administer this stuff, these groupings from scratch. So I'm going to start by adding a couple of groups. Now the groups are these little top headers that you see up here. Groups for component content are completely administered by you, the administrator. And if you're dealing with project files, the project file name itself becomes a group, and then all the tabs you add to that end up being tabs inside this little right-hand side over here that users can browse. So in this case, I'm going to add a group. So maybe if I was working with a company who was dealing with different discipline silos. So I've got like healthcare. So I've got like a healthcare group. Maybe I've got you know, a multifamily group. Okay, so I've got that. Maybe I've got commercial. Okay, so once I've got these, inside these different groups, maybe on the commercial group, I want to have a doors tab. So I'm going to add a tab here for doors. Maybe in my healthcare, I've also got doors, right? I need to have doors in all these different discipline silos, but they're going to have different doors available to them possibly. Maybe that's how I want to set it up. So I'm going to have doors here, and I'll have doors here in the multifamily. So I'll add one more tab here, doors. All right, so on the doors tab for commercial, I'm going to add families to it. Go ahead and add families. and I'm going to browse for where I have some doors that are appropriate to my commercial group. So I'll browse down here to my D drive where I've got some of my library set up, and I've got doors in my list. I'll click OK. So this is going to refresh with my doors information. So maybe on my commercial side, I want to have some of these curtain wall doors. I believe I've got a couple curtain wall doors inside of here. Yeah, I got a couple curtain wall doors right here. So we'll grab a few of these. Maybe I want to have an opening, and I want to have my double flush, and I want to have my single flush door. I'm going to add those down below. So I'm going to click OK. BIM List is going to go through, ask those families some information about them, check to see if they're already in the database, and it's going to add them, in this case, to my commercial doors list. Then I'm going to go to my healthcare group, and I'm going to add a couple more doors. So I'm going to add a few more families here. My doors list is still up on top. Maybe I only want to have a double glass door here in my healthcare facility, and maybe I want to have my double flush still, but I've got a few other doors that I want to work with. There's a double uneven door here. There might be some overhead doors that I need to work with. There might be some double egress doors in the mix I need to play with as well for some like passage doors. But I'm going to add those down to my list here and click OK. But I've got a couple of different variations here in the healthcare environment that need different doors. And then finally, the multifamily, well, they're going to use whatever doors. It doesn't really matter, anything that they want. And the nice thing about this here is that even if I'm dealing with type catalogs, so in 2016, a lot of the doors have type catalogs associated to them. Now, I'm still currently in the 2015 release right now, and I'll be using 2016 in a few of my future presentations, but for now I'm just in 2015. But if there are type catalogs at play, then the BIM list here reads from the type catalog and actually pulls its information from that instead of pulling its information from the types within the family directly. So I can definitely leverage type catalogs or not, and effectively in BIM List, I see no difference between the two. It reacts the same either way. I'm going to go ahead and add these families down here. Maybe I'll grab a couple more here from my single flush. Got a couple of vision panels here in the mix. Got some glass doors. Got some basic like residential single panel doors here, and I'm going to go ahead and add those to my list. So maybe my residential list is a lot longer than my healthcare or commercial list, or whatever the case may be, right? You can choose what content users have access to. So we're going to let this process here real quick. Again, some of those that have already been added before, they take less time now because it just looks at the database and says, yep, it's already there. In other cases where it's adding a new one, it takes it perhaps a second longer as it parses that family and finds the information. All right, so this is all component content. What about that project content I was mentioning earlier? What about those project container files? Well, let's go ahead and add one right now. I'm going to go ahead and add a project to my list. Let's go in here and grab, let's see, I'm going to go back to my D drive here. I've got a project file that's sitting right here. I'm going to use that architectural project again as my example. So we'll go ahead and grab this and open this up. So that particular project is going to become a project file name. In fact, it's the same one that was here in my other database that I used just a moment ago. What it's going to do is open up that project in the background. It's going to ask it for information that's system family based that I can bring across using BIM List that has a family type that I can actually insert into my project environment. Now while it's opening that up, Revit might flicker in the background a little bit. You notice that my background presentation came to the foreground as opposed to Revit. Not a big deal. That's just a graphic refresh thing. Inside here though, what I'm going to do is add a couple of tabs. So maybe I want some wall types. So I got wall types in the mix here. Maybe I have ceiling types. You got asked about schedules earlier. Are schedules supported? Let's put some schedules in here. I'm just going to add a few of them. Again, I can add, if I had drafting views, I don't think I have any good ones, but I'm going to go ahead and put drafting views here. Let's see, railings perhaps. Okay, so I'll just grab those and add them across now. So I'm going to expand out my wall types. I'm going to find wall types that I actually want my end users gaining access to. Some of these I may not want to show. They might be, poorly formed wall types, or maybe they're wall types that I just don't want. Or maybe I want to break these apart into two separate groups here. Maybe I want this to be wall types exterior, and I want to have wall types interior. Oh. Okay, I can do that. And so I can have all my exterior wall types on one tab, my exterior tab. I can have all my interior wall types here on a different tab. So I'm going to grab all these interior walls. Here we go. And they're going to go all to my interior wall types list. So I've got those in the mix. And as they get added over here to the BIM List database, they get removed from the list over here because it doesn't make sense necessarily to put them in more than one spot on more than one tab within the same project file. I'm going to go in here to the schedule views. I'm going to grab a few of the schedules. Some of these are just analytical schedules that I use for my own nefarious purposes. But maybe I've got things like ceiling schedules, room schedules, door and frame schedules I want to use on a regular basis. I can bring those across. Again, there's railing types. Maybe I want to be careful about which ones I gain access to. Maybe there's just a few that I want people to use, like the pipe rails for the ramps. I can bring those across and just give access to the ones that I want them to see. In my drafting views, all I have is this exit view. I'll put it across there just because, but I don't really need it in this case. And finally, ceiling types. Again, I can bring across just the ones that I want users to gain access to. Maybe this plain ceiling 5/8 isn't really what I want. I want to use a chipboard ceiling here. So I'm going to grab this one and the 2 ACT ceilings. And maybe I'll give access to a generic as well and just kind of drag and drop this across. So if I do add a drafting view over here, and then I go back to the original project and update that drafting view, how does this get that update? Well, there's two things I could possibly do. If I'm dragging it into a brand new project, it actually loads the latest iteration of this drafting view or any of the types automatically whenever I'm dragging it into a brand new file that's never seen it before. In the case of types, actual family types down here, for example, these different wall types, I can reload this back into my project and have it redefine the wall potentially. In the case of views that already exist, what I would probably want to do is rename the old view and drag in the new view and leverage that as reassociate some of my references to that view and whatnot if there was something major that I needed to update. Or I could go through the traditional old process of opening up the two side by side, grabbing the actual graphics in the one and copying across the actual drafting lines. But if I was trying to drag exit view in a second time into my project, if it was already there, it would basically go in there and go through the process of making a new view that's a duplicate with like parenthesis 1 or 2 after it. So there was also a question that popped in that said, can we imagine perhaps in the future to get tabs generated from certain family parameters? So basically automatically subdividing these based on interior, exterior, retaining foundation. Is that possible? Sure, it's possible. We would want to, talk with you a little bit more about what you would envision for that. It's absolutely, not out of the question to be able to do something like that. We can definitely read those properties and potentially help auto sort some of these tabs for you and with you. But we would definitely want to touch base with you about that. So within all of our products, every single one of them, one of the drop-down list features here from our application menu is to request a feature. And since that isn't a current feature or bit of functionality, if you're interested in something like that, we definitely listen to what it is you vote for. So go here to request a feature and type that in there. I'm interested in this, and this might be how you might do that. Because just saying I want this feature is nice, but if you also tell us like why you're trying to do it, give us some detail behind it, what you might envision for how that might look, how that might sort, how that might be updated in the future. Definitely let us know that you're interested in talking with us more about that in this requested feature. That way we can kind of come back to you and ping you again on it later on as we revisit that and actually find out a way to make something like that work and see if it's possible to work in the way that you would envision it. But all of our tools have all been built based on your feedback, based on your wishes. So we absolutely want to know about things like that. So is it possible for us to do that? Yeah, absolutely it's possible that we might look at something like that. We just need to talk with you more about that and find out more about what you're envisioning. Okay, so now that I've done all this, I've added this group here. I've got a couple of these other subgroups up here. How do I see this update inside my BIM list environment? Well, let me go ahead and just save my changes to my database real quick here and shut this down. I'll close this out. It's going to run through a quick save, and once that's done, I'm going to pull Revit back to the foreground here. Maybe. Come on, Revit. I might have clicked way too many things. I'm seeing a couple of other questions pop into the questions queue here. Let's see here. Actually, I think that was already answered. All right, we'll come back to that in a moment here. Okay, so back in Revit, if I drop down my database list here, because it's now available as a local database to me, or if it was on a central, a server someplace, I could potentially leverage that as well. But if I drop this list down, now we've got today's webinar database in the mix. So here we go. Here's that project group that's up at the top there. And I've got things like my favorites, which have nothing on it now because this new database here doesn't have any favorites stored for me. I've got some ceiling types, I've got some drafting views, some railings, just the ones that I've included here. I've got some basic schedules. You know, if you look over here in your schedules, I've only got a room schedule right now. That might be the same one as this one, but I don't have a door and frame schedule. So if I wanted that, I could simply drag and drop that across. What it'll do is define for me my door and frame schedule, and it'll be ready for me to leverage this now inside my project environment once it's loaded into here. So it goes to that original project file, brings it across, has all the formatting, all the column headers already pre-configured for me. The actual widths of my columns that was configured would have all been done as well. But yeah, it's brought across my door frame schedule very rapidly here. Pretty easy to work with that. Again, if I go into my individual groups here, commercial, healthcare, multifamily, again, I've got those different individual door tabs right there. And let's go back through and do that advanced search again. We're going to search across the entire library. There are other groups inside of here and other family types, but we're going to search just for doors using that advanced search. So I'm going to filter by the category name being doors, so it equals door. Notice this list right here, it only actually includes also what's in my database, so it helps filter this down. If your database is sort of slimmed down a little bit, you don't necessarily have every category, it's not going to list everything that doesn't exist in your database. So it makes it really easy to find stuff. Again, I'm going to go to family type or content name here in this case. If that contains, let's say double again. I think there's double doors in all the different tabs. So I'm going to go through and say if it contains a custom value here like double. And we'll click OK. So now if I go ahead and search this, again, it's going to filter out just for the individual tabs that have doors on them, specifically of that category. It's going to tell me what folder that happens to be on. And because I said the content name contains double, it's going to show me in this case just the double flush. Now that double flush happens to appear in more than one location, but I can kind of see where that happens to appear. And anything else that's double inside of there, I can find those as well based on my quick little search right here. So it makes that process nice and easy for me to go through, search my entire library for something, and filter that list down very quickly instead of trying to go through multiple folders or multiple previous projects and try and find that one piece of content. BIM List browser makes that process real easy, and it's all based on whoever's the admin setting it up, so it's in an organized way that I can actually find the content that I want.